Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Dr. Kim Hecht, and I serve as the Medical Director of Inpatient and Ambulatory Services for the Susan Samueli Integrative Health Institute. I am happy to be your host this evening, and I really appreciate you joining us for our July installment of Integrative Insider Live. This is the first part of our three-part summer series launching our Mind, Brain, Body Well-Being program. In this program, we treat a multitude of conditions, including stress, anxiety, depression, sleep and memory issues, post-concussive symptoms, headaches, lack of concentration, and chronic pain. We take a personalized approach to assessing and improving mental health, brain function, and emotional self-regulation. The UCI Susan Samueli Health Institute is proud to provide this community lecture today. We have multiple clinics located around Orange County for your convenience in Costa Mesa, Newport Beach near Fashion Island, Yorba Linda, Pacific Medical Plaza in Newport Beach. And on July 1st, we opened our newest location in Laguna Hills. Our providers who are part of the Mind, Brain, Body Wellbeing program offer their services through the Costa Mesa Clinic. Lastly, although we are all used to virtual events, before I start, I want to review a few Zoom tips for this session. Please note we are recording this session. In this webinar, participants remain on mute and hidden on the screen. There is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and you may send in your questions as well as communicate with the event host throughout the presentation with this feature. We will hold a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, and please clear all distractions so that you can enjoy, our presentation this evening. Now on to the main event. Tonight, we have the pleasure of hearing from Dr. Jessica Drew DePaz. Jessica serves as the Director of Mindfulness Programs and as a clinical psychologist at the Institute. With nearly 25 years of experience within the University of California, she has also overseen health and safety training and conducted research on mindfulness and safety in the workplace. Dr. Drew DePaz earned her undergraduate degree at UC Santa Barbara and her master's and doctorate in clinical psychology with an emphasis in multicultural community issues at the California School of Professional Psychology. She received the Distinguished Contribution Award for her dissertation, which informed the development of a college curriculum focused on combating racism and challenging white supremacy. Finally, Dr. Drew DePaz spent the past 10 years teaching mindfulness to preschoolers through sixth graders at Annalise schools. In 2018, this small school in Laguna Beach was honored by the American Psychological Association with the Golden Psy Award, a recognition given to one school in the nation per year for applying psychological science to promote student academic success and social emotional growth. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jessica Drew DePaz to this evening's Integrative Insider Live.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hecht, for introducing me and sharing about our wonderful institute. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening, and I appreciate you taking time out to talk about the mind. So I'm going to share my slides. There we go. Great. So this is called Mind, Finding the Light Through Introspective Practices. And I thought I'd just start with a definition of the mind, the element of a person that enables them to be aware of the world and their experiences, to think and to feel, the faculty of consciousness and thought. So tonight we will be exploring how we can cultivate mental well-being. But let's first step back and take a look at the context that we have been living in over the past year and a half. We kicked it off last year with a COVID-19 pandemic, which changed life as we knew it. We witnessed the killing of George Floyd amongst a multitude of other anti-Black acts. We experienced the biggest recession since the Great Depression. And all of this amidst a backdrop of climate change that's impacting everyone on the planet. And we've just emerged from the most divided presidential election, and we continue to live in two entirely polarized political worlds. So given this multitude of chronic stressors, it's really no wonder that there's been a massive impact on our collective mental health. And I imagine everyone on this call tonight is well aware of that. And when we suffer, a primary coping mechanism for many people is actually to turn away from suffering, to turn away, to distract ourselves, to self-medicate in a way with maybe increased snacking, with alcohol, with our gadgets. And this might feel good in the moment, but it often exacerbates the issues. So APA recently did a survey called Stress in America. This was at the end of January. They found that 67% of us are sleeping more or less than they want. 61% reported undesired weight changes, and 23% acknowledged drinking more alcohol. Also in this survey, we have the breakdown of who indicated that their mental health worsened. And you can see it begins with actually 46% Generation Z, 31% Millennials, 33% Xers, 28% Boomers, and 9% older adults acknowledge that their mental health has worsened. And there was also a question about concerns about the future. And 57% of Blacks, 51% of Asians, 50% of Hispanics, and 47% of whites acknowledged concern about the future. And there's more detailed data in these survey results. And it's really clear that the pandemic did and continues to have a disproportionate effect on communities of color, on essential workers, and on parents. Here's a survey from Mental Health America about mind in the workplace. And we find here that 9 in 10 employees are reporting that their workplace stress is affecting their mental health. And 3 in 5 are not receiving adequate support from their supervisors to help manage their stress. And in terms of burnout, 4 in 5 employees feel emotionally drained from their work, which is an early sign of burnout. And 56% are spending time looking for a new position, as compared to 40% in 2018. And here's another chart on anxiety and depression. This was really 3 snapshots in times, are the different color. We've got early 2019, January through June, and then a kind of mid-May snapshot and a mid-December snapshot. And we're looking here at symptoms of anxiety disorder, symptoms of depressive disorder, and then combined. And the reason the combined are not double the others is because there can be a lot of overlap or people that are having both. But you can see here that at the end of last year, that 42.4% of people had symptoms of anxiety or depressive disorder. So there's really no denying that these have truly been dark times. But as Martin Luther King once said, only in the darkness can you see the stars. And I'm sure we've all been looking for our own light in the darkness. And I came across this information on the CDC website a while ago that really says that the CDC for mental health recommendations, that in addition to mental health services when indicated, they recommend healthy eating, physical activity, getting the recommended sleep, and mindfulness. And mental health services and mindfulness for me are 2 bright lights in my life, personally and professionally. And they really are both introspective practices, which is the examination or observation of one's own mental and emotional processes. So these practices are turning toward ourselves rather than away, and tapping into our own inner wisdom. So let's begin with a bit on psychotherapy. Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls." And I thought maybe we could take a minute right now. Don't worry, I won't ask you to put it in the Q&A, but maybe just look inward and let's ask ourselves, is there anything that you do to avoid suffering that you may face? What are the activities or types of defense mechanisms that you may engage in to avoid your own suffering? I certainly have things that I do to avoid suffering, not, some of which are not healthy. Another quote that he said is, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." By making the darkness conscious. And to me, this is a huge part of psychotherapy. It's not a place to just come and only find the silver lining in life. I think we can't find the silver lining unless we're really willing to walk into the darkness and look at what's there and sit with what's there and learn how to meet whatever is there. So I love these quotes. I wanted to share those with you. This slide is intentionally overwhelming. This is actually from a website where a kind of consumer website when people are looking for a psychotherapist. This is just a sample. I didn't even list all of the types of psychotherapy. There's a lot of types of psychotherapy, which is wonderful that there's choices, but I think, once someone is ready to meet their own suffering in this way and ready to find a therapist, it can feel a bit overwhelming. Where does one start? Aside from maybe starting with one's insurance, then, you're looking at perhaps all of these different types of psychotherapy, which can be great to look into and see, what there is to offer. But I thought I would try to spend a little time, maybe simplifying things a little bit. Integrative psychotherapy. Essentially, this article that I have cited here is sharing about the fact that most therapists actually have been trained in a variety of types of therapy, and they integrate those in their therapy. And it works, actually. It can work to also stick to one, but it can work to integrate these. And this article looks at common factors associated with positive outcomes across therapeutic approaches. So these are really like the sort of top types of things that help change to come about. One, that the therapist inspires hope, that there's particular qualities a therapist might have where they really give their full attention, where you can feel their empathy and positive regard, where they help to develop an alternative and more plausible view of self and the world, kind of co-creating this with the patient, and where they're able to have corrective emotional experiences. So things that maybe took place, outside and prior to coming that were difficult, that there can be a corrective experience within the therapy. And really at the heart and the number one kind of factor that determines a positive change is the therapeutic alliance. It's the therapeutic alliance. It's that sense that this person gets me. And in order to find that, it's also trusting one's own instinct when looking for someone, right? There's research to do up front, but when if you're reaching out and looking for a therapist, to really trust your instincts on who you're connecting with, because that alliance that you feel is the most important determinant. That chemistry is the most important determinant of the outcome. And I also just wanted to share, personally, as a therapist, that my favorite part of psychotherapy is really witnessing the unfolding of someone's inner wisdom. As Dr. Hecht mentioned, my background is in multicultural psychology. And I learned early on that whatever solutions I might have for my own life rarely applies to others. So if I'm sitting with someone and hearing their story, even if I think, wow, if I was in that situation, I would do this, that's really not how things unfold, nor should it be that way, because we're different in so many wonderful ways. When I sit across from people, we might be a different age, a different race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, social class, religion, and so on. And all of these things and more, and just our basic personalities are going to impact the journey we're taking in our life. And so with most every patient that I've seen, the journey that unfolds for them is one I would never have imagined, because it is really uniquely their own. And I wanted to share also a personal story and to share about my wonderful therapist, Dr. Valora Lilly, who I began to see in the darkest time in my life, when my mother was battling ovarian cancer. And I knew it was terminal. And I honestly did not know how I was going to go on in my life without her. I didn't know how people make it through losing someone that they love so very much. And I don't know how I would have made it through without Dr. Lilly, who wasn't only there for me in my darkest of times, but has been there in the lightest of times too. And to be honest, I would not be at the Samueli-Institute if it weren't also for her guidance in helping me to achieve my dreams. So I also share with this because with you, I think can be stigma around mental health still. And it's such a beautiful thing when we're willing to reach out for help. And I also just personally believe that I cannot lead anyone else to a place that I haven't gone myself. So the next bright light in my life is mindfulness. And I thought I'd start with a definition. And this definition is from Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, who developed mindfulness-based stress reduction in the 1970s at University of Massachusetts Medical School. And his class has the most research on it, and it's taught around the world. And mindfulness is an ancient practice that's been taught for thousands of years around the world. It's been embraced by many different cultures and religions. But I'm going to use his definition, which means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. But what exactly should we be paying attention to? Well, there are many things that we can be mindful of. We can be mindful of our thoughts, our body, our behavior, our emotions, and we can also be mindful of cultivating a heart-centered existence. So let's begin with thoughts. So this is one of my favorite images. It looks so simple, but there's really, I think, a lot going on here. We've got two people walking toward 4 trees and a sun, but the one on the left, there's so much happening in their mind, right? So maybe they're thinking about their errands or the pandemic or, the laundry, so much going on in their mind. And the person on the right is seeing the 4 trees and the sun. right? They can perhaps feel the warmth of the sun on their skin, maybe hear the birds chirping. They're in the moment. One has their mind full and one is being mindful. And they're in the same place, right? Their bodies are in the same place, but one of them is not tuning into their senses to actually take in what's around them. Their thoughts and their mind has taken them away. And I ask myself a lot, are my thoughts serving me? Are my thoughts serving me? Or are they causing me stress? Usually when I answer this, my answer is no. A lot of times the places my mind goes off to, it's not serving me. And when I answer no, that's when I can use mindfulness techniques to actually bring my attention back to the present moment. Harvard did a research study on mind wandering. They developed an app called Track Your Happiness, and they ping people at various times of the day. Actually, they had thousands of people in the study from around the world that signed up for this Track Your Happiness app. So they would ping them at various times of the day and ask 3 questions. The first is, how do you feel right now? The second is, what are you doing? Are you working, preparing food? Are you talking? And then the last is, are you thinking about something other than what you're doing? And either they answered no, no, my mind is on my task at hand. Or if they answered yes, my mind wandered, then there was a follow-up question. Has your mind gone someplace unpleasant or pleasant or neutral? And what they found is nearly 47% of the time, people's minds were wandering. So almost half of their lives, they're not really living the life in front of them. They're thinking about the past or thinking about the future. And of course, when their minds went to unpleasant places, which is a very common place to go, that was causing them to be more unhappy than if they had stayed in the present moment. That kind of is common sense. But I think the most fascinating part of this research is that even when their minds went to happy places, to someplace pleasant, still overall, happiness was rated highest when minds were in the present moment, even compared to thinking about pleasant things. So there's actually a TED Talk on this, and Matt Killingsworth, one of the researchers, says, if mind wandering were a slot machine, we would never want to play, because there's really not big payoffs in terms of our happiness, in terms of the places that we go. Learning how to be in this moment actually is a way of cultivating more happiness in our lives. And I'm not saying every moment is happy, because it's certainly not. But even when we use mindfulness to show up to an unhappy moment, we can meet it in a new way that actually helps us. So moving on, we can also be mindful of our body. So I'm sure you're familiar with the fight or flight response, right? When we are stressed and there's physiological responses happening in our body, like our heart pounding or, our breath quickening, our muscles tensing. This is a very adaptive response that we have, because sometimes we need to respond to something and we need to fight or we need to flee, right? So if a car is veering toward us and we need to get out of the way, then this is a very helpful response, that our body does these things to help us, jump out of the way and save our lives. But for people, we can actually put ourselves into fight or flight when we're not facing a life-threatening situation, when we're just thinking about stress. We can have all of these physiological responses happening in our body. And when that's happening on a chronic basis, that is not helpful to us, right? It's not, there can be health consequences, and I'm sure Dr. Hecht could share a lot more about that when we're in this situation for long periods of time. Dr. Robert Sapolsky at Stanford wrote a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And he actually would take students in his lab to Africa, and they'd study wild animals, in the savannah and measure their stress responses. And what they found was that, the zebra being chased by the lion had a similar the fight or flight response, just like we do, right? But once the zebra made it out alive and that lion was gone, the zebra just was grazing in the savannah, right? Was not continually replaying, what that lion had done. Was able to sort of, now I'm in this new moment, and this new moment is safe. So I think we might have a lot to learn from zebras. But our bodies do not only need to be passive recipients of stress. We can actually use our bodies to counter stress. And so I invite you to do this with me by really tuning into our senses. All of our bodies might be here in front of our computers on this presentation, but our minds can be anywhere. So maybe you're thinking about a meeting you were in earlier, or perhaps you're thinking about what you're going to make for dinner, or maybe you are preparing dinner right now. So, wherever your mind might be, let's use our senses right now as a gateway to this present moment. So I invite you actually to even turn away from your computer screen and just look at whatever space you're in right now. And really take it in as if you're seeing it for the very first time. So you might notice people, furniture, maybe lighting, colors, shapes. And you might want to remember that part of the mindfulness definition is also doing this non-judgmentally. So if you find yourself being critical of your space, or thinking that you need to clean up more, or change something out, notice that too, and then see if you can just let it go and just come back to just perceiving what's right in front of you. And now, if you like, you can close your eyes or bring your gaze downward and shift your attention to your sense of hearing. So just noticing any sounds that you're able to pick up. You might notice sounds far away, sounds nearby. You might even notice sounds in your own body. And now shift your attention to your body, really feeling yourself wherever you are. Maybe you're sitting and you might notice the points of contact that your body is making with your chair. You might notice your feet on the floor, maybe the air on your skin, or any other bodily sensations. And finally, shifting your attention to your breath. So noticing the sensations as you inhale and as you exhale. Sensations in your nose or sensations in your mouth. Staying with your breath. And your mind might wander away to wherever it was when we started. And if so, just notice that it left and gently guide it back to your breath. And notice how you feel right now. When you're ready, opening your eyes and bringing your attention back to the computer. And so this is really something that we're able to do at any time, any place, any time. We can do this quicker or longer, just really tuning into our senses to bring ourselves into the moment. So we can also be mindful of our behavior. And one of the studies that I saw a while ago is actually focused on multitasking and looking at the fact that when we multitask, that this actually undermines our efficiency, that we don't do, when we're trying to do more than one thing at a time, what we're actually doing is task switching. We're going back and forth between tasks. We're not doing them both at the same time. We might think that we are, but our mind is really switching back and forth. And we do each task less well, and there's an emotional exhaustion associated with that. You know, so as much as you're able, and I know we might not always be able to try not to multitask, but as much as you're able, when you can monotask, that is a very helpful way of reducing stress, to just try to focus on one thing at a time. And, you know, how do we do that? I mean, well, with work, we might, you know, be focused on a document and just turn off all of our email or turn our phone off so we can focus in. But we can do it with any task at all in life. And so I'm going to just share a little meditation, a hand washing meditation that I've taught to the kids I've worked with over the years, as well as we use this with the nurses at UCI Medical Center when I did my research. And, you know, if you think about it, we've probably all paid more attention to how we wash our hands this past year than ever before. But before that, you know, I think often people know they need to wash their hands and they do it very quickly, and, you know, their mind is somewhere else. But I think when we approach this in a different way, you know, I invite you to imagine yourself right now stepping up to whatever sink that you use most often, and thinking about why you're there, you know, to wash your hands, but the purpose really is to get the germs off of our hands. And so you might reach out and turn on however you turn on your faucet. And we can use mindfulness by putting our hands under the water and noticing the temperature, noticing how it feels washing over our hands. We can get the soap and start to make a lather. And the kids tell me to turn the water off so that we're, you know, protecting the environment. So we do that, turn the water off and just start to make that lather. And I ask the kids, you know, okay, show me, how do you wash your hands? And a lot of them start like this. So we say, okay, well, if your intention is to get germs, what else, you know? And they start to show me, well, gosh, then I go in between my fingers, right? Or the back of my hands, right? Maybe under my fingernails and my wrists. So we start to wash differently when we're aware of our intention. And we can do this with heartfulness. We can acknowledge that as we're washing our hands, we're caring for ourselves and we're caring for our community, right? Then we can turn the water back on and watch the soap suds wash away, and turn it off, dry our hands, maybe even smell our clean hands, using all of our senses to come into the moment. And, you know, the nurses that we taught this to in the research really talked about in their very busy days at the hospital that the sink became this place that they could step aside and sort of take care of themselves and ground themselves in the present moment. So all of life can be a meditation like this, whatever we're doing, driving, doing the dishes, right? Having a conversation, we can notice when our mind is wandering, and then we can bring it back to the task at hand. So we can also be mindful of our emotions. And here we have someone who's feeling a lot of emotions, as we may all have been feeling a lot of different emotions over this past year and a half. And there's a study at UCLA that I cited here, and what they were looking at is what happens when someone labels their emotions, when they maybe acknowledge the feeling that they're feeling. Affect labeling is what it's called. And they found that that disrupts the amygdala. And the amygdala is actually the part of our brain that's very involved with the fight or flight. So when we get into that fight or flight place, our amygdala is very active. But when we're having strong feelings and we're able to label what we're feeling, it actually begins to disrupt the amygdala and that fight or flight that it's putting us into. So that's pretty powerful. And, you know, in many of the mindfulness classes I'm taking, including one I was in last night, we were also talking about how do we sort of, when we are labeling it, is it, you know, I'm angry? That's really claiming it. And, or I think it's maybe better to say like, oh, anger's here. You know, hello, anger. Hello, sadness. Hello, grief, right? You're here again. Like, and the next step is really to feel it in your body, to notice how you're experiencing that feeling, rather than just having it be a label, but to notice the sensations, because we become very disembodied. But mindfulness is not just about our minds, it's really about connecting with our entire being. So labeling it, feeling it in our body. And then I'm going to get into a third step too. And but it's coming back to our, what else we can be mindful of. And we can be mindful of creating a heart, cultivating a heart-centered existence. And we can do this with self-compassion. And there are researchers who are studying self-compassion and developing methods for us to bring this to ourselves. And there are classes on mindful self-compassion and you know, ways that we can offer this to ourselves. We can acknowledge when we're having a moment of suffering, right? We can acknowledge the universality of that we as human beings, that we do suffer, right? This is something that connects us actually to one another. And as you can see in this picture, she has her hand over her heart. And the researchers are finding that they're studying the mammalian caregiving system and how do mammals care for their young. Mammals use touch and they use vocalizations. And so but so often this is something that other people, you know, maybe parents give to a child, like a touch, they pick up a crying baby or maybe put their arm around their child or we do this with a loved one, but we can do this with ourselves. When we put our hand on ourselves, we can lower our own cortisol levels, our stress levels, by just placing a hand on ourselves. It doesn't have to come from someone else. It can be from us. And we can offer ourselves kind words, you know, may I be kind to myself, right? How often do we say things like that when we're having a hard time? If we really listen to our inner voices, we're often beating ourselves up and not helping it by overlaying this difficult message to ourselves. But if we talk to ourselves as we would a loved one who was suffering, right, we will have a very different voice with ourselves. So another way that mindfulness is used to cultivate a heart-centered existence, I thought I would just share a little bit about a pilot that we're doing at UC Irvine right now. This is in the Samueli.institute is in partnership with actually the School of Engineering, because this idea for this pilot came from a professor there who took one of our mindfulness classes, and the Office of Inclusive Excellence. We are all piloting a class focused on empathy and interconnectedness. And we rolled this out recently. It's actually, we just had week 4 last night of this 6-week class. And it really, the idea for this came about during the Black Lives Matter movement. And this professor who had, you know, taken one of our classes was really feeling that mindfulness can help with not only reducing our stress, right, but also having empathy for one another and connecting with each other. And so we advertised this, and we had 124 people sign up for it within a couple days. We only had room in this pilot for around 30, but it's a very exciting program that we're exploring. And we have another one coming later on that's really focused on mindfulness and racial humility. So John Kabat-Zinn wrote, "You are whole, and also part of larger and larger circles of wholeness you may not even know about. You are never alone, and you already belong. You belong to humanity. You belong to life. You belong to this moment, this breath." And so, returning once more to this guiding light, when we pay attention to our thoughts, to our body, our behavior, our emotions, and our heart, we are using evidence-based mindfulness practices to cultivate our well-being. And all we need to do is to pay attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So I wanted to end by sharing some resources, at the Susan Samueli Integrative Health Institute. This is our new building going up, by the way, at UCI, or part of it. It's actually the College of Health Sciences, but we will be located within this building. You can see the part kind of sticking out has our institute name on it. This will be done next summer is when we anticipate it will be done. So we're super excited about that. And one of our new services that I am providing through the Institute is psychotherapy. So I'm also overseeing the mindfulness programs, but I'm seeing a handful of patients a week for psychotherapy. And we do yoga therapy there as well. And I wanted to mention that through the summer, we have free yoga therapy virtual classes, Monday through Thursday. They're on our website. We'd love it if you could join us. They're yoga for well-being. And yoga therapists have 5 times the amount of training as yoga instructors. And they're really focused on also specific health conditions. So later on, we're going to have classes like yoga for bone density, yoga for sleep, yoga for cancer care, things like that. But right now we have yoga for well-being, Monday through Thursday, free through the end of summer. And here are some of our mindfulness classes. We have a mindfulness-based stress reduction class coming up in September, and a mindful parenting workshop next month. It's a couple-hour workshop that with a fabulous instructor. And we also offer classes on relapse prevention, mindful self-compassion, nature programs, and teen programs. And there's a lot happening behind the scenes too, just that we're doing at UC Irvine for different departments, getting programs out in different ways that aren't even offered through retail, but are really brought to different organizations that have a group of people ready and to take a class. And we do free weekday live stream meditations Monday through Friday. We'll make sure that you have all this information mailed out to you afterward. But you can come once or come every day. We would love to have you. And I want to just end with a poem called Birthright by Donna Falls. Despite illness of body or mind, in spite of blinding despair or habitual belief, who you are is whole. Let nothing keep you separate from the truth. The soul, illumined from within, longs to be known for what it is. Undying, untouched by fire or the storms of life, there is a place inside where stillness and abiding peace reside. You can ride the breath to go there. Despite doubt or hopeless turns of mind, you are not broken. Spirit surrounds, embraces, fills you from the inside out. Release everything that isn't your true nature. What's left, the fullness, light and shadow. Claim all that as your birthright.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. And the talk was fantastic. We're at this part of the evening where we'll be answering some questions. Some of you had already emailed us questions prior to the presentation. And so I am going to start with you. I think, you know, a lot of people, as you have noted in the surveys, have been suffering from increased anxiety, increased depression with the pandemic. And one of our participants wanted to know, like, you know, what are some ways or coping mechanisms to deal with anxiety, or how can mindfulness add or address anxiety and depression?
Yeah. It's a great question. And there's definitely, you know, I think bringing in the research is also important, but there's research on how this can help to reduce stress and reduce anxiety and depression when we're practicing mindfulness, or of course, participating in psychotherapy, or both, right? So, I mean, I imagine many people on this call, maybe you've tried mindfulness before, but maybe you haven't. And so it's really finding what works for you, exploring it, and also psychotherapy. You know, maybe you've been in psychotherapy before, maybe you haven't. But it's really opening up and seeing, like, are these, you know, pieces I want to try, and where can I try them? Is it, I mean, obviously we have our resources. There's some people like an app because they can carry it around and have that handy. But I would say it's kind of experimenting and seeing, like, what works for you. You know, what's helping to reduce your stress when you're trying these things on.
Great, thank you. And then this question I really like, because I have 2 children and they're small. And then are there effective, like, mindfulness methods for children age 5 to 10?
Absolutely. There are, you know, you can start teaching your kids. I mean, I started teaching my son when he was 4. And it wasn't like I was thinking, I'm going to sit you down and teach mindfulness. He was struggling with sleeping because he had a bad dream and he was afraid he was going to have it again. And he, for weeks, did not want to go to sleep because he was afraid of his dream. And I did all the psychology things, like normalized his feelings, or we talked about his dream, but nothing was happening to change it. So finally we started to practice mindfulness, and I really walked him through the exercise I took you through of, like, using our senses to come into the room, because he was living in his head afraid of a bad dream. So I had him, you know, look so this is a great one to start with. Just, what do you see? You know, and have your child tell you what they see. What do they hear? Have them say it out loud. You know, can they feel the bed? Can they feel the pillow and the covers, right? Can they notice their breathing? And just to let you know, I did not do it once, and that he got it for 2 years after that. Every night when I put him to sleep, he asked to do mindfulness together.
Wow.
And over that time, over that period, he started to integrate it really. And so kind of, he was a little bit of a slow learner. He was not, like, took him 2 years to get that exercise, but still he got it after some time. And he now practices on his own when he's on the pitcher mound. He takes his deep breath, and mindfulness is like his superpower now. But let me also say that I do believe the best gift we can give our children is not teaching them mindfulness, but doing it ourselves. I think that the best intervention for a family is when the parent learns these things and practices, it will change the behavior of the stressful behaviors in your child if you are learning to moderate your stress.
Wonderful. One of our attendees wanted to know, do you use expressive writing in your psychotherapy?
I don't use expressive writing in my psychotherapy. We're using it in a lot of the mindfulness classes right now. And as I mentioned, just people's personal pathways. I think writing is wonderful, and it's just not a tool that I've usually pulled from, but certainly if a person was wanting to, then that would be, I think it's a very healthy habit to be journaling. We've been journaling in this empathy mindfulness class and have had insights. Even I've had personal insights that I wouldn't have just talking. I think writing can really bring about deeper insights.
And then one attendee asked, is psychotherapy available through work at UCI? It is available at UCI. Dr. Judah Pazes is offering it, and it says, how does, the person asked, how does the payment work?
That is, we take a lot of insurance, and people make their appointment, and I'm not really involved in that part of it. I think that our front desk can answer the very detailed questions because it's very specific to each person's insurance. Whether or not we take that insurance, but I would say to call the front desk tomorrow or whenever you like, and they will be able to answer all of your questions around that.
And then another attendee said, I took a yoga class yesterday and had difficulty calming down afterwards, my body and mind. How can I return to a present state where I feel at ease?
That's a great question. And, I actually feel more of a desire to put you in touch with really who I feel is the greatest expert on our yoga therapy. And that's Katie Allen is, our main we have several instructors, but I would say to send me an email if you like with this, with this question, and I can put you in contact and have the true expert kind of explore this with you and help to get you where you need to be. Maybe give you some suggestions.
And then I have a few more questions.
Yeah.
I think all of us that have had increased anxiety and depression through this pandemic, and then we're hearing the news about, different things, or not only that, but in politics. How one attendee had asked, how do you stop negative and catastrophic thinking when facing a health crisis? And I would just say to any crisis.
Yeah. This is where I actually really feel that the self-compassion practices can be so helpful when we're because what it really is that we're facing is suffering, right? Whether it be that we're facing a health crisis or fear of the, pandemic or of race relations or whatever it might be. It's what we're really meeting is suffering, right? And I think that often when we're suffering, that our mind just can take off into story, right? And our minds can create even more suffering. I know this from personal experience. Our minds can create a lot of our suffering, actually. And so I think meeting it with compassion, using these practices where we are, putting a hand on ourselves, where we're speaking different words to ourselves to help calm ourselves down. Mindfulness can bring us into the moment, which can sometimes help reduce our stress. Not always. There's not an ultimate goal. mindfulness helps us meet our moment, but we sometimes meet our moment and the moment's hard to meet. So when it's hard, then what do we do, right? Then we can bring compassion to ourselves.
Well, thank you so much for your time and presenting this very important and timely information. I just wanted to add like a few of my own clinical experiences to your talk in addressing like suffering. Is a lot of my patients suffer from chronic pain, and we did a few group visits trying to apply some of the mindfulness practices to it. And in the beginning, when we did the body awareness kind of practices and the breathing, it actually increased the anxiety and the pain in my patients. And they're like, well, I don't want to do this breathing, and I don't want to pay attention to my pain because it is painful. And so sometimes people don't want to look at it, their suffering, even though they feel it, because they feel like it's almost unbearable.
Mm-hmm.
And in the group atmosphere, and I think this is why it is really nice to actually participate in the classes, is that over time, when they heard each other's stories and they didn't feel as alone, and they understood that other people had the same fears, for some reason, it started to become better. And now, 3 years later from doing those group visits, I see those patients, and sometimes they'll come in and they'll like, yeah, I just was practicing my mindfulness breathing and paying attention to my body before I did my blood pressure reading. And, so I would say to all of the attendees today that if you have those initial feelings of when you're practicing mindfulness that things actually feel worse, don't be discouraged. That's why we call it a practice. And there are things, and they've researched it, and you could probably talk more about it, Jessica, about, when experts practice mindfulness, the changes in their brain function and activity versus, people who are just learning it. And although those that are expert in it, they can go very deep into these levels and have a higher sense of compassion and get themselves kind of out of the stress. I think that people just practicing it early on can achieve a great level of reduction of some of their stress as well.
Yeah, but being patient with ourselves as we're learning a whole new skill set, and being, acknowledging whatever is coming up, that it's not something that we do once and then feel this like immediate relief from all the time. I mean, some people might, but that it's a practice, as you said, it's a practice, and there's a lot to explore while going through it. And I think the research is really showing too around pain. That's actually the initial research was on pain starting in the 70s at UMass with John Kabat-Zinn. But from the research I've been looking at too, it really helps with the psychological experience of the pain, how we relate to our pain.
Yeah, so I just want to let our viewers know that everyone who will be speaking about our mind, brain, body well-being, have a slightly different take. And if you don't find a fit with doing mindfulness or psychotherapy, that there may be other avenues, as Dr. Drew DePaz is talking about, whether it's expressive writing or things like that, to really engage you and help you with your own well-being. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us for our Integrative Insider Live today, our community lecture. Upon ending the webinar, a pop-up window will have a valuable survey on this evening's event. Please help us to improve our community offerings by letting us know what you think. We will also be emailing 5 key takeaways from the session to the email address provided at registration. And please don't forget to mark your calendars for the second part of our 3-part summer series. On Thursday, August 5th, we'll be welcoming Dr. Christine Krause, She will discuss services under neuropsychological assessment, including brain mapping and neurofeedback and enhanced performance sports training, which is really exciting. So more information on how to register for our events, please visit our website at ssihi.uci.edu. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.